All right, like I mentioned earlier, we always try to discuss last year a little bit every year. We also want to look forward and see what's going on or what we can predict for next year. I'm not good at predictions, but I'm going to leave that up to Bob and Glenn. But this year, you know, going in, I know a lot of people are looking back at last year and seeing some of the problems that we had and complaining to some degree about, hey, it wasn't a great year for me. And I know we get up here and talk about the bad stuff all the time, but I'm kind of at a corner here. I don't know which ends up, because we did have some awful things happen this past year, but then we ended up with probably our second highest yield that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. And so it's tough to kind of get up here and talk about some of this, but you got to remember, we're a big state, and we got a lot of area to cover, and we have a lot of good producers all over the state, and sometimes the weather plays havoc on some and gives others a kind of a refreshment of making a little bit better yields. And so again, I'm Scott Monfort. I'm going to just talk about the weather just a little bit, just kind of give these other two guys something to go off of if they need it, really and truly, but they may not. But like again, we're ending the year this past year at 748,000 acres. That is, again, very high acreage for us. We're usually, if you look at the last 10 years, we're not at this level for most of the, you know, over that 10-year span, except for the last 4 or 5 years. We really bumped these acres up, and now we're seeming to be, this is our new norm, to be in the 700,000 range. And looking at prices the way they are, fertility prices, other crop prices, even though cotton's high, I don't think we're going anywhere. I think we're going to be about where we're at, a little bit higher, because again, we don't sink a lot of money into peanuts. That's something to think about. You know, again, yield based on our tonnage report, and this was from the other day, January 17th, we're at 4,465 pounds per acre. That is phenomenal. You got to think, our biggest yield, I think, is 4,600 and something. So we're not that far off. If we would have had just about a month, you know, a month of time, a couple of weeks span through those 2.5 to 3 months of production season with a little bit of sunlight and dry weather, there's no telling what we could have done. So we are pleased that we ended up this well. Usually with this much rain, hey, we got lucky. We usually see more seg 2s and 3s just from the sheer fact of damage or problems with them sitting out in the field. We didn't see that this year. So most of ours, 99.9, graded very good. So we got very good grades, very good quality. We hope that carries into this year as far as seed stock, and we think it will. But that's something we're going to learn. And again, growers had a tough time in southwest or western Georgia, whereas the central part of Georgia, southeast Georgia, and even the northeast part of the peanut belt probably had one of the best years they've seen in a long time. So why is that? I'm gonna go through a little bit. Bob and Glenn's gonna talk about disease and fertility issues due to the weather, but what does that mean for this year and the prices along with that. I want to put this up. This is our own farm peanut trials all over the state. These are large replicated trials, and this is some of the yields that we've gotten. I want to show, this is Early County. This is in southwest Georgia. Planted a little bit late, but he made 6,900 pounds. I can say they average, this one particular person for 06, averages 7,200 to 7,300 pounds in this place. But if you look at these other ones, Bullock, Berrien, Ben Hill, and Midville, they're touching 7,000 pounds, if not over 7,000 pounds. Not to say we can't do it there. We just haven't done that very much in the last several years. That is phenomenal. That's what I mean. It gave these other people some avenues to make a little bit more on yield, and that's helped them out quite a bit. So we're pleased that the people that made good yields made them. I hate to see anybody lose yield, and we did see that. Places in Mitchell County didn't do very well. They were underwater probably worse than anybody in the state, and so their yields were very, very low. This Colquitt County one was pretty much close to that area. They did not yield very well. Bleckley County had some late rains and all that really caused that to go off a little bit. But we were very pleased with this. And so I just wanted to kind of set it up and just explain some of what happened as far as weather and all goes. If you look at the average temperatures, and this is difference from the average, and this is over the last 10 years, difference from the average. 0 is pretty much white. more you go purples and blues, you get under average, and the more you go towards the red is above average. And you can see April, we were below average, the average yield, which means we were very cold, very cool for that time of year. We're cool that time of year anyway, but we were relatively cold here. This is the one that's a little crazy. And this is averaged over the 4 weeks. May was very cool. And that's something that caused our crop to slow down coming out of the ground. You know, we got a great start to begin with, but it did slow down a little bit. We got into June, again, barely getting above average here. It's almost white across the state, so for the most part. And if you look at some of this, our May, this part of Georgia was a little bit warmer in May. Some parts were a little bit colder. So just looking at the different places, it wasn't until you get to later, and that's what I'm going to show you in just a minute on the temperatures late. But if you look at the precipitation in these same 3 months, we were cool, but we were also very wet. This is well above average for April to have this much rainfall. And you can see the south all the way across Georgia was quite a bit different than the north central part of the peanut area and over around Statesboro. You get into May, we did dry off in the southern part, not as bad as the Statesboro and some of the northern parts of the peanut belt. The southwest dried out a little bit. This was really just in a 2-week span. The first 2 weeks of May were pretty wet. So this dried out on us, but then we hit June, and here we are back again. Well above average for rainfall for June, with the central part of the state getting a little bit. We can handle this early season stuff. It's the late season that starts to wreak a little havoc when disease and other things come into play. And if you look at again, temperatures for July, we're below average. We're quite a bit below average. A couple of degrees below average on the highs. And that's unusual for July. We're usually pretty hot. This slowed this crop down quite a bit. We get to August, we're almost neutral. We are above average just a little bit, but we're almost neutral. And then we get back to September, it cooled right back off again. So we never sustain those high temperatures like we normally do. And this kind of hurt us a little bit because it didn't push that crop all the way through. We had a lot of peanuts that just didn't fill out. We didn't have a lot of blooming in August because of some of this, rain and all. October, we did get hot, but again, the southern part of Georgia was not as hot as the rest of the state. So we just didn't carry this crop as quickly as we normally do. And it took us a little bit longer to fill it out, if we ever filled it out at all in some places. So that one thing that hurt us, but the rain probably hurt us more than anything. Again, July, we were above average. August, this is when we need to be putting on those last sets of blooms on the laterals, on the limbs. And look at southwest Georgia and western Georgia. We're well above average compared to the other parts of the state, about normal around Statesboro. So this area is where we saw the yield be sustained or maintained. We lost yield on this side. And so I think it does go into effect that we just had too much moisture, and it stayed that way even in the September, even in October. The western part of the state is where we really got hurt because of too much moisture, a little bit more disease possible, but also problems with the fertility. And so it's just, you start diving into some of this, and then you start saying, okay, I understand why some people had problems and why some people didn't. So overall, again, a good year. It did play a significant role, the weather did, but when we move into 2022, don't base everything or make decisions based on 2021. Hell, I wouldn't want to do that because it's off norm compared to the rest of the 10 years, but it's likely to be different. We're wet right this minute. I don't know if they project us to be wet for the next month. They keep saying we're going to dry out. I hadn't seen that yet, but they keep saying it. Likely be cool and wet in April. That's almost a guarantee. So if we do want to plant in April, hey, we got to make a plan for that. Develop a plan that works for your operation. Again, if you want to plant early, things that we always say is plant good seed, plant the fields with good drainage. We definitely don't want to plant those low-lying fields. If you need to add extra fungicide, then that's where you can make use of those cool, wet conditions and add a little help there. Use Thimet. Tomato spider wilt is still an issue. That's going to be a problem, going to continue to be a problem. But before you put anything in the ground, you know, if you take it on seed at your facility a month ahead or whatever, we need to make sure that seed's put in a good spot. Make sure your fertility is set up in a short, you know, especially in short rotations. Make sure we're fixing problems. Being timely, this year proved what being timely means. We couldn't be timely with anything this year, and so that did hurt us a little bit. And this big one here, listen to Bob and Glenn. They can predict the future. If they tell you you're going to make a crop, then you're going to make it, I know. So don't say I said it, but Bob and Glenn, there you go. I'm helping you out.